Okay, so let's get started. Welcome, Jenny. I'm so glad to have you here. Um,
Hi.
yes, so everyone, Jenny is a has a financial planning practice and in Center City, and she also has a blog, Chocolate and Lace. And I am so excited to have her here because I feel that women, especially, but really everyone, is not taught enough about finances. I was blessed with a dad who like really sat down and budgeted, taught me how to budget, use a bank account, invest. But most people don't have that. And it wasn't until I got older that I started to see, wow, there's like such a lack of education. And of course, like the school system does nothing at all on this topic. So I am so excited to have you here. You've been an inspiration to me to really help other women with finances when I can, or just to send them to you. So yeah, welcome, Jenny. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Morgan. I'm excited.
So I let's just get right into it. Like, what inspired you to take the leap and start your own business?
Yeah, so I actually started with my firm as our director of training and development. And prior to that, I was actually in the retail industry as a regional director. And so I oversaw about 400 women. Just the industry I was in, it was fashion, and so it just happened to be, for the most part, women. There would be a few guys that would put up with us every now and then. And through leading women of all ages, I learned that they really had one of two problems: either a relationship or a significant other, or money, right? And if I knew then what I knew now, I always felt like I'd be able to make a bigger impact on people. And back to your point about, we don't typically learn simple finance at school. Our baseline is based on what maybe a parent or a peer or just someone close to us taught us. And so I was working at our firm actually as our director of training and development, and I was responsible for all of the under 5-year advisors and their own personal development. And although it is a really engaging opportunity, I was completely satisfied. I just kind of got an itch and wasn't satisfied with the amount of women advisors that we had in our firm. Just for context, we have about 150 advisors, and we cover 4 states: Philadelphia, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. And we're a very large national firm, and we only had 2 female advisors at the time out of 150. So I wasn't satisfied at the rate in which someone was coming into the career, and which a woman was being offered a conversation around her money at all levels, right? And as I continued in with my firm, I got this educational background around finance even well before I got licensed, where things started to make a lot more sense. I wasn't someone that grew up. I always say I know how to cook potatoes 6 different ways for a reason. And I really didn't receive a whole lot of financial education at an early age, and put myself through college, took out student loan debt, et cetera, kind of the same things that we've all been through. And things just started to click, and I would say, oh, this is how the rich keep getting richer. So what I wanted to do was make an impact for not only women, but anyone who didn't naturally have that conversation around money. And so I said to my managing partner, how would you feel if I got licensed? And he said, please. You couldn't go do it fast enough. And so what originally started out as a way for me to help develop others actually took into a full-time career, because I really enjoyed the impact I was making with my clients and just the differences that I was helping people to grow.
That's amazing. So let's get into that whole like the rich keep getting richer thing. Many of my questions actually pertain to that. So in terms of women, although people in general, what is the biggest challenge that they often face with finances?
Well, I think that wow, like there's just so much to talk about here, right? So everything from a wage gap to, I'm sure you guys have seen those memes that, men are actually losing more in the coronavirus because they earn more. And so they're losing more than the average woman as kind of like a joke and a play on just how much a woman earns less. But I think that men are more comfortable speaking about money, whereas I have never sat around the table with my girlfriends and said, okay, how are you negotiating your next pay raise? Or, you're a freelancer. Are you thinking about upping your rates? It's just really never a topic. And so I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is that there's a lot of stigma around money. There's a lack of opportunities for women to earn and women to grow and learn about money. And we're seeing that grow more and more. I've seen so many webinars through this whole quarantine that I've been really excited to see on all different levels, specifically geared towards women. So I think that time is changing, but there's still a lot of work to do in that area, where it becomes very natural for a woman to position herself from an early age young on and to grow well into retirement. And lastly, legacy planning, right, for their families or their loved ones, whatever that may look like.
Mhm. So in terms of a woman, I'm going to try and do this in stages, because I know I have a lot of different people in a lot of different stages in their life. So let's start off with like that person coming out of college, maybe between 22 and like 26. They have a steady job, but they're not sure what to do with their money. Maybe they're even not making that much, but they're in some sort of bridge job. What is your first advice to them to do? And also, if they're coming out with a large sum of debt, which most people are, what are you saying? What would your advice be for them?
Yeah. So the student loan situation is really real, right? Most people do have some sort of student loans, whether it be something minimal like a state school, or even a 5-year Drexel program. I'll just use Philadelphia. Their student loans are super high. So what I would say is, someone just coming off is just try first and foremost to give yourself a breather, because financial planning is about creating optionality for you to make decisions as you go in life. And while it is about making smart decisions and saving for the future, we still want to enjoy life today while saving for the future. So, I've had different clients tell me things like, I got right out of college and I started hacking away at my loans. I took a gap year and I went backpacking across Europe, right? And everyone is a little bit different. I'd say if you can learn early on what your behaviors are like, you'll have a much easier time, right? Because money management is actually more about behaviors than it is really about anything else. And I think we all hear the things that we should be doing, or we think we should be doing this. I know I should be contributing to my 401k. I know I should open up an IRA Roth. I know ABCD, right? But if that is against what we really want to do, we're going to have a hard time doing it. So I'd say first and foremost, it's giving yourself the patience and the grace to know that you're in a new phase. You've gone from being in an education system to now being on your own. And then secondly, trying to carve out and get as crystal clear on the goals as you can. Because that's what a good planning system or structure and a good advisor is going to do with you. They're going to help you get as closely aligned to those goals as you can, and then work backwards to put the math to those goals. So, I'll give you an example. Someone may come in out of college and say, I want to buy my first home. Okay, well, what state, what city, what neighborhood, what block, what street? What do you want that lawn to look like? Does it have a patio? Does it have a back deck? Does it have a garage? Are you hoping for residential parking? And all these things I'll take someone through, and it kind of sounds silly, but the closer you can get to your goal, the closer you can be aligned with what dollar amount you need to achieve that. The rest is just math and behavior and consistency in order to achieve those goals. And I think that's sometimes where, especially Well, really, to be fair, at any age, we struggle with a financial mindset because the goal feels so large and it's very hard to break it down step by step, right? And that can be said for achieving a goal such as purchasing a first home or paying down student loans, right? Some of those numbers feel so overwhelming that it's challenging to even get there. From a tactical standpoint, I'd say the third best thing that someone can do is save and create a emergency fund for themselves. And that's something that no matter if you're 25, you're 55, you're 75, having liquidity in a bank account that you have access to quickly is something that we are seeing right now in this time that America simply does not have in general. So the rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months. If you are conservative or you work as an entrepreneur where your income fluctuates more than a steady, every single week W-2 job, you want to be prepared for that. And so you might even want to save, 6 to 9 months or 9 months to a year. And again, that can feel like a very large number of what your monthly expenses are times 12. So start small. Can you save 1 month in the bank? Okay. After that, can you get to 2 months, 3 months, right? And then when you're in between 3 to 6 months, depending on your situation, that's when you can start to assess, do I pay more than the minimums on my student loan? Do I get them out of those deferments? Do I pay down any credit cards? Do I start to contribute to my tax qualified accounts for retirement? Or do I start to save for personal goals? But those are kind of the basis of where it starts.
Yeah, so you were talking a lot about spending behavior, which, as we all know, like we're scrolling on Instagram and like there's all these shoes that are coming up that you want, and the Facebook ads are now targeted just to what you like. So what is your advice on spending behavior, and what can we do to help that?
Yeah. I hope that we kind of all come out of this time saying to ourselves, wow, do we have a lot of stuff that we actually don't need, right? And while everyone's handling it a little bit differently, I know that I've looked at whether it be my closet or just my kids' rooms, I'm like, why do we have so much stuff? Like we don't need any of this stuff. So whether you go full Marie Kondo and only keep the things that spark joy, right? Or, it on the other side, it's also okay to have nice things.
Mhm.
So my recommendation is actually that you see something that you desire, right? Whether it be something tangible, or you're someone that really loves experiences and you love to travel, or you love to eat out at a really special restaurant, right? Because different people like material objects versus uh, experiences, that you wait, right? And if at the end of 2 weeks you still want it, then you wait a little bit more. And if you get to a month and you still want it, then go ahead. And if you're in a position to make that decision and spend, then spend. But I think just having more awareness of your situation and a little bit of self-control, right? To me, spending comes down to short-term goals versus long-term goals. And it's much more difficult to get to these larger long-term goals, such as buying a house, right? But if you're able to save in the interim, the likelihood of you achieving that goal is much greater. But if you keep spending, right, all of the time, then it's going to be harder and harder to reach that goal. So lastly, I just want to say it is about the balance. It's not about not buying the fancy latte or completely being super frugal. It's having thoughtful and mindful decisions around your spending that are back to your overall arching goals that you want to accomplish.
Yeah. So it comes down to setting those goals and being, you were using that word consistent a little bit ago. So how do you create like a consistent plan for yourself after you've created that emergency fund?
So the I'll make one note about an emergency fund or any type of savings, right? The best way that you can do it is systematically, where you don't have to think about it. So for example, I'll just use myself. All of my deposits from my income go into my checking, and then I have automatic savings deductions that go into savings accounts. So anything that you can put on autopilot, that you can hide from yourself. I even have like accounts for my kids, and they're physical accounts. I can't tap into them online, so I will hide like camp money away in there and like other things I just don't want to touch. The more systematic you can be with it, and the more that you can start the behavior, even if you think, oh my God, I really have no surplus from month to month, just nothing. Like I'm super, super tight on my budget. Even if it's small, $5 a month, $10 a month, $25, like super, super micro amounts. If you just start that behavior, it will get easier over time. And I think that's something that is really important to take away. And then just around, how do you reach those goals was your question for the savings, right?
Yeah. Or
Yep.
debt, also paying down debt as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks. So it gets difficult because there's competing priorities, right? And what's happening is there's not enough dollars to go around. And you're saying to yourself, well, how do I save while paying down debt, or even just paying your monthly expenses? The first place that you want to start is knowing where you stand and getting super tight on your budget. And when I say tight, just you know exactly what goes out and exactly what comes in. And it's not a situation where you're like, I have no idea where my money goes, right? That you're tracking. And a good rule of thumb in your budget is 60% fixed, 20% discretionary and spending, and 20% savings. Now, depending on where you're at, you might be higher in some of those categories or lower in some of those categories. That's okay. I know for me, I'm in the daycare years. So I think my fixed, because of like childcare, is actually around 70%, right? But each person, wherever you're at, it's okay that it's different for you. That's just a great rule of thumb to go by. And then you're able to then categorize and see, and you can use an app, you can use a actual physical planner, right? You can use anything your heart desires that works for you and your brain to track your spending. The last piece of that you want is to always protect your credit and grow your credit. So making minimum payments on any debt or bill, such as a credit card, a student loan, is something that you want to continue to do. If you're ever in a decision that I have to choose, right, rent over a bill, or something kind of extreme like that, then my best rule of thumb would be to communicate to whoever the creditor is. So let's say it's a credit card, call your company, especially right now as we're going through coronavirus. So many Americans have lost income. So many people in our state have lost income. So definitely communicate and ask, are there any programs to help me? Can you reduce my interest? Can you take my APR and move it down? Can I have a grace period that's extended, right? Like just see whatever that debt is willing to offer you. Especially around student loans, there's all sorts of different programs, and depending if your student loans are federal, if they're private, some may be in deferment. If you work for a nonprofit, there's different things there. So there's just a lot of different options, but the first step is really communicating and seeing what your options are.
Mm-hmm. And so I heard you talk a little bit about automation, and just to throw my weight behind that, it's kind of been the key for me in getting my spending behavior under control, because I don't even see it in my checkings account. As that ability to swipe your debit card is much harder if you're sending it to where it needs to go and get it out. So I am a huge advocate of that as well. Everyone is leaving
Oh,
questions.
I'm so sorry.
Yes. So yeah, so do you want to go? Actually, I have one more question and then we'll get into those. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah.
But everyone
Yeah.
keep dropping them, okay? Because we'll definitely answer those.
Yeah.
So in terms of women going into like their late 20s or early 30s,
Mhm.
those are the years of most are looking to have kids. So or create like create a larger saving legacy, like you said, or just buy a house or do big things like that. So
Mhm.
what is your advice to those women?
Yeah. Um, I think I'm not quite sure if it was this month. Forgive me, guys. I don't even know what day it is anymore. But
I think it's
Billy
April,
Mag,
sometime in April.
I know, right? I think it was March. Billy Mag's cover was actually, why people aren't having kids. And the number one reason was finances, right? Um, so, traditional America and traditional family, it's just not a thing anymore. We're very diversified in the things that we want to accomplish out there as women. And if having a family is one of those things, great. If it's not, that's okay. I think your point is that it's about a lifestyle change and a mindset shift as we grow into our 30s. And for complete context, I'm 37, so I've been there. I know we have some different ages in the room, and I think it's, for me at least, it's like, okay, like let's stop playing around. If I really want to accomplish some of these goals that I have, I want to get to that vacation home one day, right? I'm so far away from it, but like that's what I really want. Then we gotta kind of buckle down. The other things that happen in the financial world is, retirement as you get into your 30s. While you're still at least 30 years away, it becomes more of a serious thought. And how do you plan for it? Because again, the planning is to grow your options, so that way, given any decision in your life at any age, you're not stuck in one decision because of money. So when we look at something like retirement, and even though again we're typically on average 30 years away at 30, the average age of retirement is anywhere from 65 to 67 in the United States. A whole bunch of different things are happening there. So one, we're living longer. We're not dying off in the 80s anymore. We're living 90, 100. By the time we're all there, guys, I'm living till I'm 120, I'll tell you that. So we have to plan for further decades of money that the people before us and our parents didn't have to plan for. So retirement now looks like not only maybe 2 to 3 decades of money, but 4 to 5. And that's a big, big difference. The other thing that happens when we start to plan for kids is we start to think about definitely affordability, right? Like the amount of dollars a year it costs to raise a child is huge. So something that comes up there is the need for life insurance, right? If anything were to happen to me, I want to make sure that my kids are taken care of. So that's just something, more along the adulting lines, if you will, that gets thought about there. But even if the goal is saving for a down payment on a house, no matter what the goal is, I think that in every decade, we're shifting our mindset to accomplish new things and be better than we have been. And there's definitely planning for each lifestyle stage that's typical, but it still goes down to the individual. And I'll just share with you guys the approach that I take. The approach that I take is starting with the goals. And to me, rates of return, all that really geeky stuff matters, but if it's not aligned with your goals, does it? And so breaking down that math and the steps that you need to take financially in order to reach your financial goals that are aligned with your personal goals, that's where it's at. Everything else can be worked out, and we can baby step it along the way to get there. And I break that down further by really focusing on kind of 3 steps. And I think, Morgan, I've shared this with you before. The first is protect. It's protect what we have today. We don't ever want to go backwards in lifestyle. Um, I don't ever want to go back to living in a studio apartment in the heart of Boston because it was small and I didn't have enough windows. So like protecting what I have today, right? Because I want to continue to grow in lifestyle, not go backwards, but at least keep it the same. If I never get to my yacht, fine. But I definitely don't want to be in a studio apartment in a big city again. And then secondly is grow. You know, how are we growing our dollars? How are we, you know, even if retirement is $30 away, are we at least starting the funds? Are we investing and trying to grow wealth? And then lastly is optimize. So are all of our dollars working efficiently for us? As we grow in wealth, as we get closer to retirement, taxes and tax implications become more of an important part of our day to day, even more so than they are in our late 20s and early 30s. And so that's part of the efficiency around optimizing that we look for. So sometimes when I work with clients, I let them know, hey, this is the stage we're in, and it might be, you know, a couple of years till we get to some of the really fun stuff, but that's okay. Without the foundation, we can't grow.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. So I wanted to ask about financial freedom because um, you know, we see it plastered all over Instagram of like going to the beaches in Bali. um, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, and also on what are ways that you can start looking at doing that for yourself. If it's, and it
mhm,
may be very unobtainable for most people
mhm.
at this time, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it because I think it's kind of the new American dream. And so I think people may be interested in what you have to say about it.
Sure. So, especially in the world of Instagram, I think it's really important to keep in mind that the majority of what you see is fake, right? And like, I try to be really transparent about that, even through my blog, is that a lot of things are curated and it's just a picture. Like, if you guys ever looked at some of my, like my personal account, you'd see like this really pretty food picture and it looks so beautiful, but like, literally it's in the middle of my house that's a hot mess with like children and now a puppy running around everywhere. So I want to keep it real that a lot of what we see on social media isn't real, right? And that's just the reality. But to your point, we do absorb it and we do tend to desire or, you know, grow towards that aspirational living. And I think financial freedom, that definition is different for everyone, right? So like financial freedom to me is different than it is to you, than it is to Sarah, Eleanor, Rachel. Like I see you guys up there. Whatever your financial freedom is different. It could be as simple as to be debt free. It could be as I want to be a millionaire. It could be I want to be a billionaire with a B, or you know, I want to backpack and just travel and right. I do think that there has been a flow and attractiveness of traveling and kind of being able to work from everywhere. And I do see that happening because of online. Like we weren't doing this 5 years ago. It's 8:30 at night and we're having a webinar in the middle of a pandemic. How cool is that, you know? So there's a lot more freedom out there, and the internet allows you to be whoever you really want to be, which is pretty cool. But your definition of financial freedom looks different to your neighbors, and that's totally okay. Um, I'd say in terms of debt, I would think that each person would want to be debt free, but then there's some debt like a mortgage, right? You're building cash value, you're building equity in your home. That's not necessarily a bad debt. So it does look a little bit different for everyone.
Thank you. All right, let's
Good,
get to some of these questions.
good.
So what are some of the ways you're ensuring you're creating generational wealth?
Yeah. This is probably legacy planning and generational wealth, which I did not come from, is probably one of the most exciting things to me, because I have the knowledge and the opportunity to create that from my daughters. So I have two daughters, they're 2 and 7. So I think that there's a number of many different ways and investments that you can create generational wealth. Whether you're investing in properties and building a property portfolio, whether it's cash and investments, And then a last way is through permanent life insurance. So this is a really cool way that I hope you guys don't mind sharing. Permanent life insurance is different than like what you hear on the radio. It's not term insurance. Term insurance is good as well. They have different purposes, but it builds cash value. It's something that you own. It's more like you're purchasing a house than term insurance is renting a house. So this might sound weird, or it may not, because we don't all know each other yet, but I have life insurance policies on my daughters. And it's not because I think they will die or anything like that. It's because it's something that I put money into. It's a vehicle that will grow anywhere historically with the type of policy I have from about 4 to 6% at least. And it's going to grow over time. So I put money in every single year. And by the time my older daughter is 30, she'll have a nice chunk of change that she can either keep it growing and pass down to my children, my grandchildren that don't exist yet, which I hope she does. Or she can take it out and say, Mom, I want to have a big wedding, or I want to buy a house, or I want to use this to pay off my student loans. It's building some optionality in there. But that's one way that I can share with you that I personally am working towards building generational wealth. And it becomes a really important part of someone's legacy planning and wealth planning later on in life, as well as there's numerous different estate planning tactics that people do in order to leave gifts behind and trusts for their loved ones. So it's hard. So I hope that answers the question, because those are the numerous different ways, but everyone is very different in their situation. So the real work on anything financial is done one-on-one, just because every person sits in a different spot and has different capacities.
Yeah,
so some of these
absolutely.
questions will look like an overview. Yeah.
So what books slash do you recommend on financial literacy?
Yeah. So some of the most common ones are like David Ramsey, right? Susie Orman. And I think that those are all really great. I think when it comes to financial literacy, we have to be mindful that finance is not a one-size-fits-all. What applies to me doesn't necessarily apply to you, and so on and so forth. There are many great best practices, but overall, it is very, very customized and very personal advice that you should be taking for yourself. And so every single thing that you read about, you'll have to then take it into consideration. How does it apply to me? And does this make sense for my overall comprehensive plan? So especially on platforms like Instagram, most people on the internet talking about money aren't even licensed to do so. So, I am licensed and heavily regulated. So there's so many things that I just can't go online and say because of the regulations and because you're speaking to the general public. And again, it's not a one size fits all. A book that I do really like is by Alexa von Tobel. Trying to see if I have a copy of it in my room here. It's called Financially Forward. And the reason why I like it is that Alexa does a really good job of taking today's world of technology and applying your money through utilizing technology. And I think it's an easy read. It took me like 2 days. She does a really good job of just speaking in realities of growing wealth. She talks about apps like Acorns and of course utilizing things like Mint for budgeting, but just different ways that you can grow your money and even micro invest. And I think that that's, especially as we go through coronavirus, that's the reality right now, is that it may be some time until general America is playing around in the market. And I think she does a really good job of that. The other things, I'll actually think I have a book list of send to you, Morgan. But anything that is tied to motivation, productivity, building consistency, you can kind of, Rachel Hollis's books are great, right? Sometimes she talks about money every now and then. But you can kind of take that and apply to your financial world, right? Just to get you on the same behaviors and the same path.
Mhm. Yes, please send me that. I'll send it out in the,
Yeah,
the follow-up email.
yeah,
um, okay, so when people say pay yourself first, can you explain that? Is it an automatic amount that you withdraw from each paycheck?
yeah. So it might be. All that really means is that before you put all your money to bills, keep a little bit for yourself and start to build your own savings account. And whether you call that just your general savings or your emergency savings, even if it's a small amount. So my question back would be for everyone, do you save first and spend the rest, or do you spend first and then save, right? And that kind of dictates your level of making saving important to you, right? And I know it's important to everyone, but just your ability to be disciplined in that manner, because it's a whole heck of a lot easier said than done. Think about that, and how do you do that? So the example here is an automatic amount. So look at your budget, meaning how much you make every month after taxes, okay? And then how much you spend every month on your fixed expenses, including things to live like groceries, right? So your fixed expenses will be your rent or your mortgage payment, utilities, your cell phone, if you have a gym membership, groceries, childcare, if that's something that you do, your car payment, car insurance, gas, anything that you spend every single month and you would consider it necessary, okay? Those are your fixed expenses. You're also going to have discretionary expenses, like how much you spend, I don't know, shopping, or how much you spend going out to eat, or just going out and kind of enjoying life, or if you have an expensive hobby, any of those things. See how much you have left over. And if, let's just say you have $500 every single month between what you earn and what goes out to bills. Take a portion of that and put on automate. So maybe it's 250 goes into savings and 250 you get to spend on just whatever, right? It's okay if it's not 500, start smaller. So I do think that automating pay yourself first is a great way to do it. If you're really tight on your budget, you want to be careful on this, because I don't want anyone ever overdrawing on their funds, or anything in that matter with their banking. So I would automate it if you can, and if not, even for my daughters, I keep a jar with like $5 bills in it to teach them that behavior. Try that too. But it's just about knowing that if you start, even if it's a small amount, it's going to grow to where you want it to be.
Yeah, and with automation, it is astounding what banks and credit unions will do for you. If you get on that phone, you go, okay, I want $5 in this account, $5 in that account. It can get really intense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think I don't know about now, but right before this all hit, a lot of banks were offering cash, cash. I was gonna say cash prize, like a cash bonus if you opened a bank account or savings and you did a direct deposit.
Mhm.
The other thing about bank accounts too is just to know your fees. So how much does it cost you to have your checking account or your savings account? If you can go without a fee, I think that's definitely preferable than paying $10 a month to keep an account.
Absolutely. Okay, so if you work for a nonprofit, what benefits do you have financially?
So nonprofits have to do with your student loans. So I need to, full disclaimer, I'm not a student loan expert. I usually work in partnership with GradFin around student loans, because GradFin is a company that will take student loans and work to refinance them with you. So if you do have student loans and you work for a nonprofit, after you've worked for that nonprofit for 10 years, they have a 10-year forgiveness program. So it's for various professions, right? If you're in the medicine profession, even if you're a lawyer and you go to work for a nonprofit, teachers, all sorts of different professions. That's probably the biggest that I'm aware of. And then I'm just thinking really, I would, because I've actually never worked for a nonprofit before. It would be a question that I would ask your tax advisor. And so whether you work with the CPA or you just use TurboTax, pick up the phone and call and just say, you know, are there any tax efficiencies for me working for this nonprofit? But the biggest benefit is really in if you have student loans, that forgiveness program.
So when people start paying their student loans right after college, what's your advice on that?
It's so situational, right?
Yeah.
So an ideal world, we wouldn't have more in student loans than we're earning in income. But that is simply not the case, right? The reality, and there's a handful of schools in Philly that I see it really frequently, where people have $200,000, $300,000 of student loans, and then they get out of college and they start earning $50,000, $60,000. And that's a great income. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just the amount of student loans is super high. So this is going to depend on so many different things. What your income is, if you can start making payments right away, if again, they're private or they're federal, because different things are happening there. If you've taken the loan with someone else, such as a parent, right, what that looks like. So what you have to do first and foremost is just know what all of your options are. And the best thing that you can do is consolidate them as much as possible, because typically someone who's gone through 4 years of college, maybe even 5 years, or they've gone on to get their master's, has different loans with different institutions. If you can consolidate them and get them to their lowest interest rates as possible, that is your first step. And sometimes between private and federal, you won't necessarily consolidate them all into one. So getting with an expert, and again, if anyone wants me to connect them with a student loan expert, I would be happy to. And just seeing what your options are. And these companies can be tricky. So just getting on the phone with someone and having them spell it out, dumb it down for you so you completely understand and there's no surprises later on about like deferred payments or putting something into forbearance, right? The answer is really to do with what's in your means. But first and foremost, consolidating them as much as you can and getting the lowest interest rates as possible.
Yeah, it's a interesting thing. College debt, it is like unprecedented, you know, how much there is. Okay, so going on to we have someone opening an LLC, and I'll just read what she said. I keep getting ahead of myself and nervous about all the responsibilities, such as how do I pay myself? I don't see myself doing this for some time. What if consultants should I hire? What are your top tips for an entrepreneur starting to take the dive into entrepreneurship?
Okay, cool. So I'm going to answer, Sarah,
Yeah.
if you want to, would love to hear what type of LLC you're starting up. If you don't want to, that's okay. But I think we all want to support you. So small businesses. It can be overwhelming, but there's so many cool things about this, right? And the flexibility that you're giving yourself and just this opportunity is really big. So I actually have 2 LLCs, and even my blog that I just write about and post pretty pictures, I made into an LLC. And the reason why I did this, and you're super smart for starting an LLC, is to protect myself from liability. So that way, if I do something that someone doesn't like and they want to come sue me, they're suing my company and not me, Jenny Meassick, right? So there's 2 people when you're forming a business that you want to form good relationships with. One is a lawyer, okay? You can definitely legal Zoom it. It will be a couple $100 cheaper, but in the long run, what I found and because I work with a lot of women-owned businesses, they'll do something online, but then they have to go to a lawyer later on. So then they end up paying more money over time, right? So I actually have a couple of really great trusted lawyers that I love. They all happen to be women, if anyone needs a referral. So that lawyer to set you up correctly. And then second would be a tax person. So someone that can ensure that you are establishing yourself in the right way for taxes, that you kind of know what to expect, because you're going to have to go from paying annual taxes to quarterly taxes. So what that looks like, right? And then really just for being effective, you want every single deduction in the beginning you can possibly get around owning a business. So you're going to go from, I'm just going to make an assumption that you were like a W-2 employee before, right? So now the majority of things in your life that can be tied to your business, you're going to charge those expenses to your business. So those are two really important people that I want you to surround yourself with. If you need some great referrals between Morgan and I, I'm sure we can find you some great people. And then secondly is keep your personal life and your business life, your money, keep it separate, completely separate, which is really hard to do. And when I meet with most business owners, that is the number one thing to do. Everything's commingled. And this is bad for not only managing your finance, but also from a legal standpoint, to have your money all commingled together. So open up a business checking account, and even if nothing is in it, right, pay things through that account. If it takes a while, and most businesses, it does take a while for things to come in through it. Then your question around, how do I pay myself first, right? Yeah. So you're going to make one of two decisions, most likely. This is just typical. You're either going to kind of take whatever profit you get, pay your bills, and whatever is left over, you're going to put in your pocket, right? And sometimes it takes some time, but typically what a business owner will do once they've established is then they'll start to pay themselves a salary. And that salary may be super low at first, right? But a lot of your expenses, you're going to start to run through your business. So like your cell phone, automatically, I'm not a tax person, but you're probably going to run it through your business. So a lot of your expenses will become business expenses, and your cost of fixed living will go down because you're running some things through the business. So that's one of two things that you can do. But I don't know. I don't know that many businesses, even huge. Like, I think I saw a post that was like, these businesses started in a recession, and it was like Uber. I'm trying to think of some other ones. I don't know if you guys saw that. And it takes a while to get to that point, right? The question on what consultants should I hire? I hope I've answered all the questions before that. Definitely a lawyer. Lawyers can be really expensive, but sometimes are also not as much as you think. But at least consult one. Find one that will give you, 30 minutes of their time for free to just have a consultation to see if you need them. And then as far as other consultants other than the tax professional, you're going to need different things in your life, right? You might need a business coach. You might need a life coach. You might need a part-time employee to do administrative work or bookkeeping for you. You might need a lot of different things, like right now having a webinar service. So what I would say is try to be as lean as you can in the beginning, right? And as you can start to make these investments in yourself and in your business, I think anytime you put dollars into an investment, you're going to work harder to make that investment work. It's just human nature. We want to get out what we put in. But try to be as lean as you can, get your tax situation together, ensure that legally you're in a good spot. And then what other help from there? Morgan, do you have anything to add to this one? Because you work with.
I have a question. How, as an entrepreneur, do you save for taxes?
Good question. So my peers and I are actually very, very different on this. And I say that because the majority of my peers are men. So if I know my tax status, I have two dependents. So I know about, what my tax bracket looks like. Okay. And that's something simple. It's a look of a chart to figure out. If anyone wants to know that, I can help you find that. So I set aside, my tax bracket is a bit higher, but I also have, I don't know, feels like 100 deductions that I'm going to take right out. So for every $100 I make, I put $20 into a savings account. Okay. Because I'm saving 20%. And I think that it will be more than enough because I have so many deductions, right? Because, God, you name it, for the most part, I can deduct it. Everything but a home office, it feels like. But that's a good rule of thumb. So whether that amount of the percentage that you save is 10% or whether it's 30% or 25%, making systematic savings. Eventually, most entrepreneurs will go to paying quarterly taxes and it gets easier to keep up with. But that's just something to remember. When you get a check for $1,000, it's not a whole $1,000, right? Now, a lot of my peers who just happen to be men, they do it all at the end and don't save systematically for it. And for me, that makes me freak out because then I'm like, well, where's this money gonna come from, right? Like, I'm not planning for it. So again, this is something that is with your grain. Go with what you're good at. So whether you save every month for it, every quarter, or you just kind of do it all to the end, it depends on your approach. I'm someone that doesn't want to be stuck with a large tax bill. I'd rather pay as I go and break even. If you like a refund, then you should be overpaying. If you are okay with having a big tax bill at the end of the year, then yeah, you don't set money aside. Hope that's a fair answer.
Totally.
Yeah.
So Eleanor was kind of jumping off of Sarah. She's preparing to open a Reiki and yoga studio in about 12
Oh.
months. So yeah, if to sum it up, it sounds like what she's asking is like, what are your advice for brick and mortars versus like online businesses?
Mm-hmm. It's pretty similar. Well, they're not similar, but yeah, as far as getting yourself structured, I'd say the only more complications on brick and mortar is that you have liability, right? If someone slips and falls on the sidewalk outside of your yoga studio or in the bathroom, right? How would you handle that? So some type of liability insurance is important. And then the overhead is much more, I mean, you have overhead versus like an online business that doesn't have overhead. So some things like a disability policy for disability overhead expenses, which basically protects you. If anything were to happen to you, this policy will come in. Say you break your leg and you can't be a yoga instructor for, I don't know, 4 months. This policy comes in and ensures that at least your power's getting turned on, your rent is getting paid on your yoga studio, and any instructors are also receiving payroll, and everything keeps going. Just because you're not in the business, you still need that business running without you there, and that's what a disability policy for your overhead expense will do. But I'd say like the liability is probably something big. Also the disability. I think that's really it. Everything else, get a good tax person, get a good lawyer, right? And then because you're brick and mortar, negotiate, right? Like, so when you go and find your first studio, maybe you're already there because you said 9 to 12 months. So when you find the place and you're like, it's the one, and like your heart starts to pitter patter because you're so excited, you can just see like all of these amazing things happening there, right? I've been there. Negotiate the heck out of that space. And if it's not the deal for you, even though it's your dream space, thank you, next, keep going, because anything that you're opening for the first time, there's still so many unknowns, and you have to be lean as possible, right? While still making investments, but real estate has a price to it. And so that's something that you should try. Some things you can't negotiate, but the worst you're going to hear is no, right? So, and that goes with like your credit card companies to anything. It can't hurt to ask. The worst you're going to hear is no.
I love this question. Bouncing off keeping things separate, how do you fund the startup of a business? Is like that initial deposit not counted as intermingling? Is it seen as an outside investment?
Um, there's so many ways. So I'm really fortunate to work with as clients a company called I Fund Women. And if you haven't heard of them, I would love for you to check them out, because they literally fund women-owned businesses. Like, that is what this organization does. And there's 3 owners, 2 are in New York City, 1's in Boston. They're all moms, that's how I know them. And just wonderful, wonderful human beings that crowdsource money to fund women-owned businesses. So there's also so many just different, from like we are women-owned businesses, like there's just so many opportunities for you to receive grants and funding. So it is kind of like applying for college. Like, you got to do all these applications, and they're annoying and they suck, but like, free money versus no free money, I'm going with the free money, right? So anything that you can get as a grant, go for. Okay. Then the next question is around how do you fund it, right? So you might fund it from your own personal funds. You might take out a business loan. You might ask friends and families. You might go the angel investor route. You might go one of these organizations. There's all of these different ways. And the investor game is a really tight, hard game. That's probably the one reason that keeps me in the services industry and not like a physical product or anything brick and mortar, is just the funding and the taking on debt and the loan can get really intense. It doesn't mean you should shy away from it, right? You just should decide like what's for you and what's not for you. So those are all different ways. I know some really big successful businesses in Philly that have all been funded through friends and family, which is just like crazy to me. And I'm like, can you adopt me into your rich family? But so how you go about that is really how much risk and debt that you want to take on. But there is a lot of options for women-owned businesses. Maureen, I think we're all women on the call, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I don't want to make any assumptions if we've got some guys out there. And then next is the initial deposit not counted as intermingling. So like, there's not like a bank account police that's going to come along and say like, you had this in that account, right? But over a long period of time, you want to keep your funds separate. So yeah, by all means, your first deposit of any funds you get is probably going to go into a personal account. The sooner you can open up a business account and put money there or have money come in there, that would be a good best practice. And is it seen as an outside investment? Yeah, if someone is providing you dollars, it would be an outside investment, but there's nothing really negative there. I hope I answered that. Let me know if I didn't.
So, are there other questions? You're welcome to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you did. Thank you, Eleanor. That's fine.
Cool.
I have one that I always like to ask. If you could give advice to Jenny back in the day, what would it have been like coming out of college?
So stay away from men. just write my book, get my business, do all my things. And so whether it be a man or a woman, just like, if you have a focus in your dream, like try Yeah, and everyone's a little bit different, but this is like completely being honest, try to keep the focus up and not, let people that aren't meant to have a seat at your table stay at your table, right? Like, you need to surround yourself with people. I came from a really small town. All of my best friends are still living in that same small town. And I don't mean anything negative by it, but they're all still there. They're all still doing the same things that they were. And if I could have found a way to grow out of that quicker, it could have been a little bit further along, right? And I'm sure you guys have all heard, like, surround yourself with the top 5 people. You've all heard that quote. Surround yourself with great, positive, forward-thinking people is really important. And we often don't know where to find those people. When it comes to money, I've always been super hardworking. Got a job at 14 and a half, worked 3 jobs through college. Like, I've got the grit and roll up my sleeves in me. But I think what prevented me from elevating early on in my 20s was just a true lack of knowledge, right? Like, I knew I had to put money in my 401k. I had no idea what a match was. I even got stock through my previous employer. I had no idea what was going on there. And I just kind of never slowed down to say, hey, I shouldn't actually glaze over my company benefits, and I should actually educate myself on what that is. And so whether it be I didn't have the resources available, or I just wasn't in that mindset to ensure that I really know what is going on with my personal situation, I'm sure it's all of the above. That was something that if I knew what I knew now, 10 years ago, I would have even more growth and even more elevation from a financial standpoint, because I was always a hard worker. So those are a couple of very different things. Yeah.
And out of curiosity, what's your next big financial goal that you're going for?
Yeah. So there's well, there's 2 things. So and they're kind of boring, but one is definitely buying a house. We want to stay in the city, and city homes are pretty expensive, but rather than kind of buy like a starter home or something that we don't, want to stay in forever, I'm ready to settle and get my forever home. And then if we do stay in the city, that probably means a private education for my daughters. And that was something that I was not even thinking about or prepared to do. So that's a very hefty cost that I'm now in the stages of planning for. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, it's so interesting. It's like we think of those big goals as like the vacation house or like doing our 3 months in Europe, but often they're just like, how do I live life to the fullest? So
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point though, because we actually finally booked our first family vacation. So I have a 2-year-old, guys, and a 2-year-old is like no joke. It can't take her anywhere. So cute, so crazy. So we finally booked our first big vacation end of May, right? And the reason, wow, can I really justify spending that much on a vacation right now? Like, I have daycare and we have this and we have that. And Joe's still ending his residency, so he's still growing in his career. But I think it's finding time and dedicating and making things work by creating the life and the design that you want it. And travel was something that was really important to us. So the vacation's at the end of May. We'll see if we actually get to go.
yeah, seriously. Well, thank you so much. Is there any final questions before I end this off?
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, Jenny, where can people find you? What are your offerings right now?
Yeah, so I will actually type in my cell phone, and I'm working from home, so reach out to me on my cell phone or my email if you want to reach out. So my office is out of Center City, down in Rittenhouse, but I have a national practice, so I don't know if everyone's in the Philly area on the call right now. So if you're not, it's okay. I'm licensed in probably about 40 states right now. So I typically work to offer people financial planning sessions. And what I love to share, and what's really cool, is that I'm not a fee-based planner. And why I chose that route, there's 2 different routes that you can take being a financial advisor. You can either go fee-based or not be fee-based and get paid through the companies, right? Other ways in which the companies pay you. And I chose not to be fee-based because I was really focused on providing women an important conversation around their money. And I think that sometimes people are really deferred in getting a planner because of money. Yeah, oh, I'm not ready. I don't have $1 million. Like I'm still trying to figure it all out. So I didn't want to defer anyone who really could value and use a conversation and deserves a conversation around money by being fee-based. So that's something that I love to share. And what I typically do is all these days we're getting on calls, we're not meeting for coffee. We're getting on calls and it's about 30 to 45 minutes and I'll hear about your goals. You know, what do you want to accomplish? And from there, I'll build out a plan and share with you some recommendations and guide you along the way in order to reach those goals. And I think it's always, I mean, I've never had a negative experience because if nothing else, you meet some great people and you meet a great friend. So anyone on this call, Morgan, anyone in your circle, I'd love to connect with. Even if you guys have a simple question, there's no question too small. I am the epitome of asking all of the dumb questions. So don't worry, I've already asked any question you could think of and would just love to chat and hear your goals and add value in any way that I can.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you everyone so much for coming. This was such an amazing conversation. I know for so many people, I was like, you got to get on this call. You got to get on it. And I'm so happy I was able to connect and we can talk about this and start to like make money not such a bad thing to talk about. So thank you so much for being here. And I just want to remind everyone, I will send out an email of this recording and all of Jenny's like contact information and that book list. So don't worry, it will come. Yeah, thank you again, Jenny. And I'll see everyone next week. I have Jess Baumgardner on, and I am so excited. She's like Philadelphia's health coach, and she has a new program to helping new mothers. So thank you, Jenny, and I'll see everyone next week.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Morgan. Jess is awesome. So hope you guys get on that one too. All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.